like the informal sessions before, after, in between, in the toilet, and during refreshments, because that's where the I don't know, in my view, yeah, the honest and true opinions come out here. So I'm sure there'll be ample opportunity for that later. Yeah. I'm Michael Haw, the Dean of the Faculty of Law, and I'm very happy, very proud this morning to be given these 3 minutes here to welcome you here. And I welcome you very warmly, all of you here. And I hope to be forgiven for not mentioning all the luminaries here, the stars of social work who are in your presence today. Yeah? There are too many of them to mention. Yeah? It will take me the whole morning here. So may I welcome all of you, and also members of the audience here. Let me just leave you with a thought which I had just now when I looked at the sponsors here of this conference here. Well, we all know what kind of atmosphere and sort of political situation that Hong Kong is in now, yeah. And this kind of thing stands out like an oasis in the desert, yeah. Because here are the different sectors of Hong Kong society, yeah, collaborating, working together in cooperation for a worthy cause, yeah. Okay. We have Mother's Choice here, NGO, yeah. We have CCPL, Hong Kong University Academia. We have the Hong Kong Council of Social Services. Well, if I can put that under government, yeah. There's a no there, but shall I say quasi government? Yeah. And there's XL3 funder, yeah. So this is the kind of dream collaboration, yeah, that I think we should hope, the kind of model that we should adopt, yeah, and that we should expand to other fields, yeah. Right? Child protection is, of course, immensely important. Yeah, there's perhaps nothing more important than to take care of our young people. Yeah, yeah. But you also shine like a beacon, like an example. Yeah, of collaboration in so many other areas. Yeah. So I commend you for this collaborative work. Yeah. Now I will introduce Ms. Pooja Kapai, who is my dear colleague. She's in front here. She'll be speaking to you in a moment. Yeah. And Pooja is a repository, a reservoir of worthy causes here. She spends her life, yeah, her professional life, her free time, or whatever, yeah, her whole life championing, fighting for, studying, researching worthy causes. Yeah. She is also into women's issues. She's also into ethnic minorities and so on. Yeah. So whenever there's a worthy cause, there is Pooja. Yeah. So it is no accident that she is the one, yeah, who is a key person here today. I know that she has many other collaborators, and I will leave it to her to introduce them to you. Yeah. So with that, I hope you enjoy yourself in this 2 days, right? This 2-day event, and come away with some knowledge and much inspiration. Yeah. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Michael. That's a really very generous introduction. I'm very, very grateful that you see me in these terms, so thank you for that. I'd also like to invite up on stage Alia Aris, who's the Executive Director of Mother's Choice, to join me in the opening conversation that we're going to have. It's not really going to be an opening speech as such. We thought we'll chat with you and each other about what we're looking to do in these 2 days today. So the first most important point, really, I think, is to express both of our gratitudes to all of you for being here today with us as we sort of embark on what we hope these 2 days will represent for us. And what that entails really, I think, comes down to why we've envisaged a need for this kind of an event. And as Michael signaled very well, indeed, it's a collaboration that is much needed, but also one in which we're looking for inspiration from each other because we're all engaged in this work, which clearly is extremely important to all of us. So, Alia, let's start off by considering why we thought this event is a must-do.
You know, as I look out across this room, I see so many of my colleagues who are on the front line of working with vulnerable children and families in Hong Kong and in the region. And I think the thing that unites us is we are passionate about child protection, and we all believe that children really thrive best and are protected best when they're in a safe, permanent, and loving family. The interesting thing for me has been learning from you that that's not just an inclination or a desire, but that's actually something that's a legal right or a human right of children, that's something that's actually founded in the law.
Exactly. And you know, as lawyers, we all know that there are these broad international legal frameworks, but for many of us who are working in the field, often these frameworks appear to be very far away because we feel that there's really nothing concrete for us to apply. But sadly, you know, we understand, at least in Hong Kong, through a research and several research studies, in fact, that have been done on children's rights issues, that there isn't necessarily the level of understanding as to the rights that children have, what the contents of those rights are. The most recent study on this was conducted by CCPL together with the Hong Kong Committee for the UNICEF on children's rights education. And we found that there's a great discrepancy between teachers and children in terms of what the notion of rights are. And in fact, for many of them, the idea that children have rights that are enforceable was also quite a surprise. Many of them had not heard, for example, of the Children's Rights Convention. And there was more a sense of, you know, children have responsibilities, they have duties, they don't know well enough to know what is good for them. So we're still within that framework in our society where we're not cognizant of the ways in which our thinking and our ways of work actually silence the voices of these children whose rights to participate and have a say, because they have agency in these decisions that are made about them daily, is not at all well recognized. And so really this is an opportunity for us to sort of go back to this document in a way, and we'll be leading out with that in the morning session, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, to look at what can this framework lend to us as practitioners in the field, and is it really all that fluffy, or is there something concrete that we can come away with, that we can integrate into our daily work? And what might that look like for each of us? Because of course we recognize that all of us in this room wear different hats. Our engagement and coming across children and their circumstances may differ widely. So with the workshop setting, we're also hoping to be able to pick out some of those environments in which you're making decisions or discussing options. And we're going to look at best practices in terms of how you could integrate theory or law into sort of practical outcomes.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's the most exciting for me about this conference, and why I'm so pleased to see so many of you here, because I think we can all agree that we want to see the children of Hong Kong and in our region protected, and that we want to see children achieve permanency, not just permanency in a family, but a safe and loving family. But I think the challenge for us is, even knowing that that's the law and that that's their right, is how can we practically achieve that? Because I think for so many of us who are dealing with children and families on the front line, the challenge oftentimes is, I know that this is what's best for the child, but I am operating in extremely challenging circumstances and really difficult stories. And so that's why, as we move into the conference, we're really going to focus on giving 3 sort of groupings of very practical skills to help you achieve that permanency. So you'll see the 3 sort of factors to permanency that we put together. The first is really around holistic assessment and early intervention. The second is, how can we truly collaborate across disciplines? And that's why it's really encouraging to me to see so many different disciplines represented here today, so that we can really meet the unique needs of each child. And then finally, even for all of us who are working in NGO or in government or in academia, oftentimes limited resources is a challenge for us, but to really talk about how we can leverage resources available in the community to protect children and affect permanency as something that we are going to talk about practical skills and what's available for us right here in our own city. So I'm excited, and I'm just so grateful to each one of you for being here. Your willingness to take the time to be here, to share with each other and to learn from each other means that I believe we can change the life stories of children in Hong Kong.
Absolutely. And I just want to leave you with a short meditation of about, 45 seconds. If you imagine that everybody in this room goes away with a certain skill set, all of which is centered around thinking about how the child is at the center of the outcome that you're trying to bring about in your particular professional context. And if everybody in this room is working towards that goal, we all are like-minded individuals. And if you then encounter a challenge, which we all do in the course of our work because somebody says, this is not possible, that's not how we do things, imagine that the conversation just turns to a different one, where you call someone and they say, I know where you're coming from. I know why this is so important. Give me a little bit of time. I'll come back to you with some news. So that could potentially be the kind of environment that we can create if we gravitate towards this integrated and interdisciplinary model.
Thank you, Pooja. Now it's really my great privilege to welcome a representative from a partner to so many to us, and that is Mr. Lam Ka Tai. He's the Deputy Director of Social Welfare, focusing on services, and we're so grateful to have such a senior person from the Social Welfare Department join us and really kick us off this morning. So will you join me in welcoming KT, please?
Professor Michael Hall, Ms. Paya Kapai,
Yeah.
Mrs. Alia Ayres, Dr. Dave Anderson, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here today to join you at this conference on the subject of child protection. And this two-day conference actually provides a platform for professionals like you to share our experiences and knowledge and practices to facilitate permanency planning for the welfare of children in Hong Kong. I'd like to pay warm tribute to the hosts of this conference, Mother's Choice and the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong, for their concerted efforts to bring together leading local and international academics, social workers, legal and medical professionals, and child welfare practitioners to share their experience and work together for the interests of children. The government is concerned about the well-being of children and their families and is committed to protecting children's welfare and enhancing support for families. We've got a network of services to cater for child welfare and family needs. We've also put in place a range of preventive, supportive, and remedial services to address the multifarious needs of parents and families under the child-centered, family-focused, and community-based direction framework, as well as the guiding principles of accessibility, early intervention, integration, and partnership in service delivery. To this end, the 65 government-funded integrated family service centers and the 2 NGO-run integrated services centers provide individuals and families in need with a continuum of preventive, supportive, and therapeutic welfare services. The spectrum of services provided includes counseling to help families to adapt to their changes in roles, financial status, and daily life, enhancing parents' knowledge and skills in caring for their children, referral to relevant community resources such as maternal and child health centers, etc. We've been reviewing the provision of welfare services in the light of social developments and the changing needs of families. Having recognized the importance of early childhood support and intervention for the long-term development of children, the government has attached great importance to stepping up the comprehensive child development service which is implemented jointly by the Labor and Welfare Bureau, Education Bureau, Department of Health, Hospital Authority, and the Social Welfare Department, to identify and meet at the early stage the varied needs, social and health needs of children aged up to 5 and their families. We believe through early intervention, early identification, and interdisciplinary collaboration, appropriate services can be mobilized to promote the health development of children and the families. In the panel discussions this afternoon, my colleagues, together with the expert practitioners from Department of Health, Hospital Authority, and Rainbow Lutheran Center, will share with you the cross-sector collaboration under the Comprehensive Child Development Service to achieve early identification and intervention in promoting the health development of children. As we truly believe, children are best nourished in a supportive, caring, and loving family environment. But sadly and in reality, not all families are intact or function harmoniously. For the sake of the children's well-being, it's sometimes necessary to arrange out-of-home care for children. Residential care services in Hong Kong provide out-of-home care for children under the age of 21 who cannot be adequately taken care of by their families for various reasons, such as illness, desertion, imprisonment of parents or carers, and children's own behavioral or emotional problems, until they may reunite with their families or get settled down in permanent homes through adoption or independent living. As home-like environment is beneficial to children's development, non-institutional social care services like foster home and small group home are our core pillars in the development of residential care services for children here in Hong Kong. To enhance support for families in need, the Chief Executive has announced in this year's policy address that the Social Welfare Department would increase the levels of foster care allowances and provide 240 additional foster care places in phases. To encourage foster parents or foster families to take care of young children, an extra incentive payment will be introduced for foster parents taking care of children under the age of 3. To promote public awareness of foster care service, the Social Welfare Department will launch a series of television and radio announcements in the public interest and posters on foster care service shortly to encourage and recruit suitable families to participate in foster care service. We've for years been adopting the permanency planning approach to handling child welfare cases with the objective of serving the best interests of children. Permanency planning approach is the systematic process of taking prompt, goal-oriented actions within a specific time frame to maintain children in their homes or live in a safe and permanent environment that offers continuity of relationships with nurturing parents or caretakers, and with the opportunity to meet developmental needs and establish lifelong relationships. We are committed to that approach with the participation of frontline caseworkers and management officers. Regular training is organized to strengthen the capacity of social workers for casework settings and residential units in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to conclude by extending my warm appreciation to all participants for your commitment to promoting the well-being of children. It's never been easy, but it's worth our joining hands to work for the best interests of children. I wish you all a fruitful and stimulating conference, and I trust you come away with good food for thought on how best to collaborate for our next generation after this two-day intellectual feasting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lam. May I invite you now to please sort of head over to that side of the stage where there will be a souvenir presentation on behalf of Mother's Choice. Thank you so much, Mr. Lam Ka Tai. May I ask you to please stay on stage? Kindly remain on stage. I'd now like to invite Professor Michael Hoare, please. Thank you so much, Michael, for your kind support. Thank you, Michael. Please stay on stage with us. Dr. Chua Hoi Wai, may I ask you to please come up on stage as well? Thank you so much. Please stay with us on stage, Hoi Wai. Thank you. Dr. Lucy Jordan, can I invite you up on stage, please? Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucy. And may I now ask Mr. Patrick Marie Herbert to please come up on stage? I'd now like to invite our other special guests on stage for a photograph with our distinguished guests here. Professor Samson Jay, Associate Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences. Professor Chow Chun Bong, School of Public Health. Dr. Edward Chan, Department of Social Work. Edward, are you here? Mr. Samuel Chen, Chairman of the Hong Kong Occupational Therapist Association. And Ms. Patricia Chu, Associate Director of the Family Institute at HKU. I'd now like to remind all participants, if you need to use the simultaneous interpretation devices for our keynote speech, which will be in English, you're now reminded to put those on, please. I'm going to move on now into our first panel, where we have the distinguished pleasure of hosting Dr. Dave Anderson. Dave is the founder of Safe Families for Children, Ashoka U.S. Fellow since 2008. He's also a child psychologist and executive director of the Lydia Home Association, a nonprofit ministry based in Chicago. Dave received his doctorate degree from Chicago School of Professional Psychology. He's also served as a clinical psychologist at 2 medical centers, the Lutheran General and Mount Sinai hospitals, working in forensic child abuse assessments and child mental health services. He's worked at Northwestern University and the juvenile courts of Cook County, developing and testing a parental evaluation process to help determine parental capacity and risk of harm. He's been an executive director of a child welfare agency for over 25 years, implementing foster care, residential treatment, early child development programs, and counseling services. He launched Safe Families for Children 14 years ago, which has grown to an international movement now. He was selected as an Ashoka Global Social Entrepreneur and Prime Mover Fellow of the National Social Movement Leader, and he's also won the Peter Drucker Award for Nonprofit Innovation in 2010. He also has received the American Orthopsychiatric Association's Presidential Citation for Humanitarian Service. With this distinguished record, I've no doubt that we have a great deal to learn from our keynote speaker. Please join me in welcoming Dave on stage. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. It's good to be here. I appreciate how kind everyone is and for your willingness to allow me to share really my lessons over the years of trying to make a difference in the lives of children and their parents. And I want to speak to maybe there's a handful of you. All of us want to make a difference in the lives of children. That's why we're here. And we want to help support their families. But there's a handful of you that want to do something on a very, very large scale. And so I just hope that some of my comments might be particularly encouraging to you as we look at not just how do we help a handful of children, but how do we help thousands and thousands of children on a massive scale. So what I'd like to do is just share with you, this is how I broke up my talk today. One is to really talk about the idea of who are these families. I'm going to speak from a United States context because that's where I'm from and that's what I know best. And I'm not sure exactly around the need how much will be will translate into the Hong Kong context. Second, I'd like to just talk about the idea of a vision. How do you develop a vision? How do you think of something bigger and more powerful that really has the ability to potentially change our world? And that's what our kids need. We need a vision that will have the ability to change their world. I'm going to then talk about the solution I came up with, which is Safe Families for Children. You might have a different solution, but this is a solution I came up with. And more importantly, when we look at a grand scale, when we look at things such as a movement, delivery methods and idea of partnerships play a significant role. Delivery method is probably the most important thing that I understood over the last 15 years when I was developing Safe Families. What is the method of getting this out to people? All of us could think of something really cool and help 1 or 2 or 3 families, or 5 families, or maybe 50 families. But how do we think of something and deliver it in a way that helps thousands of families? And I think that's my challenge to you. When I looked at risk families, and I'll tell you what I mean by at-risk families, I learned that in the United States, there's really only one way, mostly one way, to help them, and that was the foster care system. But there needed to be an event that we called child abuse that triggered the resources of going into the foster care system. Without an event, many families did not have an organized way to get the resources they need to prevent this event from happening. And I'm a psychologist. I spent my life, my doctorate degree was, what is the psychological impact of child abuse? So I spent years studying what does child abuse, how does that psychologically impact a child, both in terms of their development, academically, emotionally. But I didn't realize until now my foster son is 33 years of age that the impact of child abuse can continue throughout their entire life. He still struggles today with what happened to him before the age of 5. And he had all the therapy that one could be given, but it's something when you are harmed by your parent at a very young age that affects you in a very significant way. So after I saw his life and still at 30 struggling with many things, I committed my life to thinking about how can we prevent this thing called child abuse from harming in the lives of kids. Now, if you look at the U.S. context, we have 3.2 million reports of child abuse a year in 2014. 3.2 million. 702 children were victims of child abuse. 24, half of them, more than a quarter of them, were below the age of 1. So we're talking about little people that are in a difficult age. This is the one that I was shocked by. When I thought of child abuse, I always thought of physical child abuse, right? That means someone physically harming a child. And I studied it, I researched it, I testified against parents who would break a child's arm or leg or give them a concussion or burn them or whatever, that I was shocked to realize that that child physical abuse is only 17% of kids who go into foster care. Then I was surprised to learn, everyone's heard of sexual abuse, right? Inappropriately touching a child or exposing them in an inappropriate way, which is only 10% of kids going into foster care are because they were sexually harmed by an adult. I was shocked to learn that 75% of kids going in to foster care, into the foster care system, are because of something called neglect. And in the United States, the foster care system was not built for neglected kids. It was built for kids who were physically harmed. So we're putting in a large number of children into a system that wasn't designed for those types of kids. Currently, there's 1.3 million children who receive child welfare system. Our average stay in foster care is 377 days. So a little more than a year. Once a kid enters the system, they don't get out until a little bit more than a year. Some states, kids stay in 2 to 3 years. The cost annually, which a lot of government people are interested, and that's why Safe Families is such an interest to them. The cost annually is $124 billion to deal with the problem of foster care. And the lifetime cost of a child being harmed, one child being harmed, lifetime cost is more expensive than diabetes or a stroke. $210,000 lifetime for a child to be exposed to child abuse. Now, I'm from Illinois, Chicago, Illinois. It doesn't have a great reputation now because of all the murders that are going on, but we did have the Chicago Cubs who won the Baseball World Series. But in Illinois, we have 260,000 calls to our hotline on children who have been harmed. 110 allegations, 17,000 children are in foster care. Of note, when I started Safe Families 13 years ago, there were 52,000 children in foster care. So in a short period of time, there's been a dramatic decrease in the number of kids who are going into foster care. But that is starting to change. Now, everyone knows, at least in the United States, the outcome of foster care is probably very different from here. The outcome of foster care is very poor, right? For kids who are in foster care, or what we call age out of foster care, more than half of them are unemployed. When they turn 18 and they have to be on their own, half of them are unemployed. 2 out of every 3 children will not, these are kids who were age out of foster care, will not have a high school diploma. They will not be able to get a high school diploma. PTS rates are double war veterans, people who are exposed to in war, and 1 out of 3 foster care children end up in our criminal system. So one could answer, this was surprising to me, that foster care can be the leading feeder for human trafficking. 60% of kids that are in human trafficking are ones who have grown up in foster care. When you think about it, it makes sense, right? and you're in foster care, all your familial rights have been ended. Your relationship with parents, and often your relationship with your foster parent, all of a sudden is ended because now no longer is anyone being paid to care for you. And so when kids age out of foster care, they have no one to help them out. Now, in talking about neglect, my particular interest was the area of neglect. Neglect is commonly related to poverty. 15,000, if you look at the income levels of 15,000 and below, one is 44 times more likely to be a victim of neglect because of the income because of income levels. And it results in potentially inadequate food, shelter, clothing, despite having food pantries on every corner, despite have government resources that are available to anyone who is interested in them. Poverty is the biggest driver of neglect and the reason why kids go into foster care. And we know that there's a detrimental impact in the lives of children who are exposed to neglect. It could be from early childhood brain development, not being exposed early on to in a cognitively stimulating way, so your brain develops at the normal pattern it should be developed. And we studied that in great detail about the brain development of neglected children. It could be cognitive and other developmental delays. Maybe if your mom didn't pick you up enough or didn't speak to you, you would have language delays or physical delays where walking and talking became more difficult. But things like that can be turned around rather quickly with given the right intervention. Medical conditions such as failure to thrive or malnutrition, behavior disorder, are all consequences of neglect and have a significant role. But when you look at who are these moms and dads who neglect their children, who are they? The most common characteristic across the board is this issue of social isolation. Now, they might be substance abusing, they might have other difficulties, but the common characteristic of all of them is that they have no one else to turn to. They're on their own trying to make this work. If married, most of them are not married, but if married, their husband might be disengaged in some other way. But the most common reason that kids are in neglect or in a neglectful situation is because of this problem of social isolation, which all it means to me is you have no one to turn to when something goes wrong, right? When something goes wrong and things start to go wrong where maybe you lose your job or you're kicked out of your apartment or whatever, most of us would have someone to turn to. When I had to go to the hospital and I had to have surgery, I had 15 families call me up and say, "Can I take your children for you to give you a hand?" Can you imagine being in a situation where you're having difficulty and there is absolutely no one else that you can call and reach out to? And it could be because of distance, which is a problem in America. It could be because families are socially isolated and disengaged, which might be very different than what's like in Hong Kong, where maybe an extended family member is available. If they have an extended family member, many of them struggle themselves with issues of substance abuse or challenges and aren't available. So despite what it is, it could be that they're also substance abusing or have domestic violence issues or whatever, but the common factor that leads to child abuse is this issue of social isolation. Now, I thought that's an easy solution, right? If that's the common driver for children being harmed or neglected, and that's the driver for it, the solution is to have someone for them to call, right? That's an easy solution. So I started to think about that. Oh, well, let me just go over a couple more things. Characteristics in neglectful families are often chaotic, right? If you don't have regular income, or maybe you haven't been parented appropriately, life in your family is often chaotic. You might not know where the next meal comes, or you might have some other difficulties that are stressing you out. You're living from check to check. You don't know how to pay rent next. That creates some chaos. Parents are deemed, research shows that neglectful parents have fewer positive interactions with their children. It could be verbal interactions, such as talking to the child, which helps them develop language skills. It could be just visual interaction, looking at your child. And the research showed that neglected parents have fewer positive interactions with their child. Most likely because they're distracted. They're distracted by this whirlwind of chaos that is going on in their lives. Few have virtually no social supports. They come from impoverished neighborhoods. They have precarious standards of living. You'll see in a minute when we talk about who are the families we help. And violence and crime has often coincided with parenting neglect. So around 14 years ago, I spent my life studying child abuse. I spent my life prosecuting parents, because in Illinois, you can speak on behalf of a child. And so I would do research on children, and then I would go to court and testify on their behalf. Then I started spending my life looking at how do we treat child abuse before or once kids enter foster care. How can we create a better foster care system? How do we create better residential treatment centers? How do we create better situations like that after child abuse occurs? Never dawned on me about what if we help before child abuse occurs. And then I was working in my agency. A mom came up to me. She just walked into our building and said, "I'm in trouble. I need someone to take my children." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. We can't really help you. But if you harm them, we'll be glad to help you." Which is, I didn't say that literally, but that's how the system in the United States is set up, right? You need this trigger incident called child abuse. And then once you have that, you have access to foster care and all the resources. And this mother grabbed my arm and she said, "No, I need you to help me." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I need you to take my children for a short period of time till I get back on my feet." You ever have one of those moments? I don't know this was a moment of mine. You ever have a moment where you're confronted by something and you have this choice of, do I do this or do I not do it? I thought of all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, right? I have children, I'm busy, I run an agency, I have 200 staff. By the way, my son has to go to soccer. All these reasons that I thought were important reasons, soccer and all these things of why I shouldn't help her. But she was persistent and her kids were adorable. And I said, okay, well, I was a foster parent at what time. I'd be glad to talk. I'd be glad to take your children. So I took them in, and I noticed two things. I'm a researcher at heart. I used to study foster care. I could never find out why foster parents and bio parents or birth parents never really were able to develop a relationship, right? In most cultures where I've been at, the foster parent and the birth parent never really develop a relationship. Well, when I took in this mom's kids, we developed a very positive relationship. And I concluded there were two reasons mainly. One was that I wasn't getting paid, right? I wasn't benefiting personally from taking her children. The second reason is I had no ability nor desire to adopt her children. So when you remove those two threats of money and you remove the threat of potential, I might not get my child back if I do this, a very positive relationship develops. In fact, I've been asked to go to speak in numerous states and numerous child welfare leadership about how can we help foster parents better connect to placing parents so that they can develop a relationship. So this mom, she got back on her feet, she got her kids back, and then she knew more moms, and they started coming, and I would ask people who were my friends, can you take in kids? And I'd ask my relatives, could you take in children? And then no one would pick up the phone if I were calling them anymore because I had kids for them to take. But I wrote a letter to Mayor Daley. This is where we begin to move into thinking outside the box, right? I wrote a letter to Mayor Daley, who is more popular than our governors. Well, all of our governors are in jail, but he's more popular than our governors. And I said, I have this idea that we could find hundreds of people and we could create a safety net for children in Chicago. Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't it be cool that if there was ever a child that needed a place to stay, a parent wouldn't have to beat their kid in order to access that resources? And so I wrote him a letter. I've never written anyone famous before, never written anyone famous since. And he responded and asked me to come in, and he said, well, what do you need? I said, well, how about $50,000? And he said, that's easy. And then I thought, shoot, I should ask for $100,000. Never really a good fundraiser. But then he said, you have to meet with the head of DCFS. And so I met with him. He's the head of our, remember, he had 52,000 children in foster care at the time. And every child costed this person $30,000 a year. And so if you do 30,000 times 52,000, that's a lot of money. So I told him my idea. I could find hundreds of families, and he said, how many do you have? I said 5. So I was a little risky, right? I could find hundreds of families. Nobody would want money. Nobody would want money. They're only doing this to be helpful. He looked at me and he said, Dr. Anderson, he was this Irish mafia, very threatening, had this gruff voice, never ever smiled at me. Dr. Anderson, it's the best idea I've ever heard in my entire career. No one is doing this in the entire country. And I said, great, I was starting to feel a little good, like maybe I might get somewhere. And then he said, it'll never ever work, don't bother wasting your time. And in fact, he said, you, pointed at me, you will be a complete failure. Well, I've always had low self-esteem my entire life, and I never wanted to fail. But I asked, well, why would, if it's a great idea, why would it not work out? And he said this to me. I never understood this until probably 10 years later. He said, children are not valuable in our society. He said they aren't. Think about that a minute. Children are not valuable in our society. If they're your own children, right, most of us would die for them. If someone walked into my house and said, in 2 seconds, I'm going to shoot somebody, I would immediately raise my hand and say, shoot me first, without even thinking about it. Most of us would die for our own children. Or if we adopt a child and they become like our own, we'll die for our own children. He said there is nobody else in our society, and this is United States, could be different in Hong Kong, there is no one else looking out for someone else's child. Nobody. Why do you think we have to pay people to take in children? And we don't even pay people enough. We have to pay people more to be interested in a child. There is no one else that will be interested in someone else's child. So if you are to be successful, that you need to change the way people think about children in the United States, where you have to move people where they're willing to care for and love someone else's child, a stranger's child, love them as if they were their own, and then give them back to the parent. You know, before he said it will never work, he summarized it. He said that. So you're finding people love kids as if they were own and give them back. And I'm like, perfect, you got it. And he's like, that will never, ever work. So this is my second moment of what do you do? And I was very, very tempted to leave and to say, well, since there's only 5 of us so far, there's no harm. I failed many things in my life. Failing one more won't hurt me. And I was very tempted to leave. But then I was struck with this little girl when I worked at Mount Sinai Hospital. My job was to interview at Mount Sinai Hospital in Chicago. They would take in, at the time, the worst abused children in all of Illinois, put them at Mount Sinai Hospital, and then my job was to evaluate them. And I met this little 5-year-old girl. I read her chart. She had a beautiful face. But I walked into her room and she was unrecognizable. Unrecognizable. She had a broken arm, her eye was detached, and she was whimpering. And my job was to find out who might have done this to her. So she told me a little bit about it. She didn't go into details. Then I met her mom. I had to admit I was angry at her mom because I thought somehow she might have been part of this. And she said to me, Dr. Anderson, I have this job, and if I were to lose one more day's worth of work, my babysitter fell through. If I were to lose one more day, I would lose my job. And it's hard to find work. I was barely making it for my kids. So I asked my ex-boyfriend. I did know he was a substance abuser, but I had no one else to turn to, and I asked him to care for my child. And then this happened when I got off work. With my help, she lost her custody of her child, which was very upsetting to me. And I thought, if this mom had someone else to turn to, this wouldn't have happened to her, right? So I was reminded of that. I left, and this guy was a bummer. You're going to be a failure. And then I thought of her, and I'm like, no, I think we could do something and make a difference. If it's true, children are in bad shape because parents have no one else to turn to, that I think we can make a difference. So we went ahead. I developed this thing called Safe Families, a simple idea. We recruit families to take in children, volunteer families. We recruit families to take in children for short periods of time. It's not adoption. We don't adopt. We become like extended family, right? I grew up in a family. I would often go to my mother's house for vacation or a break. No one ever looked at my parents and said, "What's wrong with you? Why are your kids going to grandma's house?" Because it was a normal thing. It was a normal thing to go to extended family. And in fact, that when we came back, my parents were in better shape because they got a break. And so how can we build a massive extended family network for those families who have none? And so part of it was kids need a safe place to go for a short period of time. And then I thought, does a parent have to prove themselves that they're worthy? Now, if you're paying people to take in kids, you have to go through this assessment process, and you have to say, are you worthy for us to help you, right? Is your situation worthy enough? And I thought, no, we don't want to do that. That we should value children. This is important. That children should be so valuable in our society that there would be a safe place for them anytime that parent needs it. And it's driven by their value. It's not driven by whether the parent is worthy. It's driven by kids are valuable and they should be safe. Now, if you have to pay everybody, of course you have to set limits, right? Because then it becomes impossible because you're paying everybody to do this. But if you create this free, massive network of people willing, and you're driven by life and by the value of children versus by worthiness, then all of a sudden you develop this safety net for valuable kids. So what we try to do is really three things. One is we want to keep kids out of foster care. In Illinois, there are kids that need to go into foster care. If you have a broken arm or if you have a concussion or whatever, then you need to go into foster care. And you need that coercion of a judge and lawyers telling you what you can and what you cannot do. You need to have that to help you for the protection of kids. But there's a massive number of children that are going in, that are in difficult situation, and they haven't harmed their children physically. And if we could provide them a support system, that we could make a difference in their life. So we want to not only deflect kids from foster care, but for me in particular, I want to prevent child abuse. Because I know, and you'll hear about this more later, the sequelae or the impact of child abuse. Because child abuse early on can have a lifelong damage to a child. Maybe not damage, but have a lifelong impact in a child's life. Lifelong. Self-esteem, distrust, uncertainty, struggle. My foster son, 33, he has 2 kids. He calls me grandpa, and I really hate that. I hate that he calls me grandpa. But I am, I guess, a grandpa. I've never adopted him, but he's still my son. He's still my son. Not legally, he's still my son. He calls me grandpa. He still struggles to this day, even though he's a good dad. He's a good dad. He still struggles to this day with what happened to him before the age of 5. When we got him at 5, he had been in 12 different foster homes at 5 years of age. So our goal is we want to love kids, but it's not just about kids, right? We do want to love kids. We do want to protect kids. But we want to redeem their parents. We want to help their parents. Why? Is because that's what the kids want the most. They want to be back with mom and dad, if at all possible. So we host kids, we support them, we support parents. Their biggest problem is isolation. Our biggest resource is a sense of community. And it really looks like this. There's a mom in the middle. We have what we call host families, volunteers taking in children. Then we recruit other volunteers, and they're like, okay, I don't want a child, but can I help? And we call them family friends. They're like mentors. They're coming alongside, befriending parents, helping them out. Can I help you find work? Can I help you do whatever? Then there's this group then we have family coaches, which is a volunteer that is like a coach to a parent. How can I help you get into resources? How can I help you get back on your feet? And then, if you don't like kids in your home, if you don't want to befriend anybody, you don't like people, then we have what we call resource friends. These are people who have things. And you know what? We all have things, right? In America, there is so much stuff. Extra mattresses, extra clothes, everywhere. So when I became an Ashoka Fellow, this business consulting firm, McKinsey, said, we love your idea. We want to build something for you, an app, to help you get things from this person to this person. And it completely revolutionized the work that we do. Because everyone has extra stuff. But yet there are parents right down the road that need the very stuff that is extra to you. How do we connect them? And so we have this growth to date. We're at 108 hosting. We've done 29,000 hosting arrangements. We've done laws. We've built, I think we're at 12 right now, state laws. And the laws are designed to protect the parent. So they're not seen as incompetent or unwilling, that they're making a decision for someone else to take their care. Now we've grown in Canada, the UK. It's exploded for whatever reason in the UK. It's exploded. Kenya, and our goal this year in the United States, our goal is to have 100,000 people helping us out, 100,000 families. This is what it looks like in the U.S. and the UK. The initial response was, it's not going to work. He also said to me, it's not going to work because you are in the most selfish generation in history. I'm what's called a baby boomer, the end of a baby boomer. The baby boomers are the most selfish generation. Well, the ones behind us, I think they're millennials, that's some of you guys, are the most selfish generation. We have more and give less, including our time, than any generation before us in America. And so we, our key factors that we do in Safe Families is something we call just in time. And I got this from Toyota, right? They developed this idea of just in time, and it revolutionized their workforce. And what it means is you provide what is needed at the very moment is needed in the amount that is needed, right? And so that's what we do. Because it's all volunteer driven, we could provide what is needed. Parents don't have to adjust their needs to what we're offer. We adjust our needs to what they need. I mean, we adjust what we have to their need. We provide what's needed in whatever context it's needed at the very moment it's needed. At the very moment it's needed. There are so many times when they said, we need you to be in here in an hour or less than an hour to get these kids or something bad is going to happen. So we've had to gear up our entire force in order to respond, to provide in the very moment it's needed. If you're in a crisis, I did this once. It was late at night. All my staff have left. I got a call from a mom. She said, I'm in trouble. I need someone to take my kids. I said, I'm sorry. Is there a chance you could wait till Monday? And she said, no, you don't understand. I'm in a crisis and I need someone to take my kids. So we had to become mobile and responsive and change quickly in order to respond to the needs that were around us. A couple other things, the power of informal supports. I talked about that. I'm a psychologist. I do psychology. I do parent training. But I found that some of our host moms are just as good or even better than I am in teaching these moms how to parent their children. Why? Because it's how it's being communicated. It's not from a professional, it's from a mom like me that is helping me to help my child. And so instead of me doing clinical work, I said I could help so many more people if I worked through people. And I train them and help them to help parents. And that's what we try and do. That's what we're about. The idea that we call ourselves, we're volunteer driven. Our volunteers are our change agent. We're volunteer driven, but we're professionally supported. There are social workers behind the scenes, but we're truly behind the scenes. We vet people, make sure people are safe. We're checking on kids, but they're all behind the scenes. It's the volunteers that we see as the change agents. We moved from, this was hard, we moved from being center-based to home-based. I got rid of all the offices of my staff. Because we found if you have an office, you want to go to your office, right? I want to go to office. But for them to be effective, they need to be out in the field. They need to be where the families are, out visiting them. And so we all come and they come and have shared desks, but people don't have offices anymore. Because we need them out there, not in with us. Supplementary care versus foster care is called substitute care. What we call ourselves is supplementary. We supplement a parent. We don't replace them. We supplement them. There are times when I, as a dad, need to be supplemented. I come home from work, I'm stressed out, I'm overwhelmed. I need someone to step in, my wife to step in, and be a little bit more active than I am because I have other things going on in my family or in my life. So we supplement that. We realize when we take power, coercion, and money out of a program that there are really positive things between very different parents. Parents that are very different than us. Parents that struggle with things very different that I would probably never ever meet. This is important. Parents that I would never ever meet, they're struggling with drugs. Maybe they're prostituting. I don't meet prostitutes. They're struggling with things like that. I would never ever meet, now become friends. They're friends. They come over after they get their kid back. They come over to my house on Easter and celebrate with my family. They come over to my house on Christmas and celebrate with my family. I'll call them once in a while and I'll say, hey, we haven't seen your kids. Can we take them off your hand for a while? Like a grandparent does or an aunt and uncle does. We normalize and institute these caring relationships to people who don't have them. And I shared some of these other ones. We call it, some people see the reuse, going back in again, as a negative thing. From our perspective, reuse is not negative. In fact, it's positive. People call recidivism, and recidivism is bad. We call it reuse, and reuse is good because it's normal. It's normal for someone to step up and help you. It's normal to ask help. We have to normalize asking help. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. We have to normalize the idea of you're reaching out and seeking help and not to have baggage tied to that. I'll skip some of this stuff. They come from all over. DCFS is our biggest referral source. They call it edge of care. At the very moment they're about to take foster kids into foster care, at their very moment, it's been proven that the child has been neglected. It's been proven that that child needs to be out of the home. At that very moment, they randomize the kids to safe families versus versus foster care, because we're under a study to prove that caring people can make a difference in our society. And so we do edge of care cases, but if a parent is arrested and there's no one to get their kids, we'll go get those kids. If a mom is needing to go to the hospital and kids are sitting in the ER because there's no one to get their kids, we'll get those kids. We'll get any child, because we're driven by the value of kids, that every child is important. When you have a massive network, then every child, you have no limits. In Illinois and Chicago, we now have 1,100 host families. 1,100. We're 4 or 5 times bigger than any foster care agency. And it's all free. We have thousands of other volunteers. Last year we placed 1,100 children. All free. Because of the movement of people in our community that are taking ownership of our community. That are saying, I can make a difference. I don't need to be paid to help. I can help. And so we go ahead and we will help anyone. Most of our kids come because of homelessness or some kind of parent difficulty that they're struggling with, but we'll take them for any reason. Nearly all go back to their mom or dad. 90% go back to their parents. If you include relatives, 94% go back to their parent or a grandma and grandpa that are now free because they're able to take them. The majority go back home. Most of our kids are under the age of 5. Actually, 70% are 5 and below. With this big number of 1-year-olds that we're responsible, that we're taking. Newborns, we have so many newborns, you can't even count them. There's so many. Of course, that's what foster care is getting. That's when parents are the most vulnerable, right? They get this new little guy. I don't know what to do. No one showed me what to do. It doesn't come with instructions. And that's when they're the most vulnerable. And how can we step up and help them? And then we're up to 6,000, 7,000 placements a year. It's based on this idea called hospitality. It's based on this idea called hospitality. Hospitality in the Greek means love of strangers. Can you imagine the first time you meet someone, your reaction to them is to love them? Can you imagine if we had a society that wasn't paranoid, that wasn't upsetting, that wasn't against people? Can you imagine that that's the first reaction, is to love them? When you have a child in your home that you've never met, the immediate reaction is to love them because they're a child. The immediate reaction is for them to become part of your family because they're part of your family. There are benefits to it. There's benefits to me and my family. There are benefits around, for me and it teaches my kids, you need to hold lightly to the things you have, right? Materialism is so prevalent in the United States. People hang on and get more and ask for more and stuff. This is different. You hold lightly those very things that you've worked so hard. It gives purpose to my family. It gives me a chance to demonstrate to my kids, this is what it means to be an American. This is what it means to be human. That we reach out to others. So my kids are learning from the start that this is what it means. This is our responsibility. No matter how successful you are, you have a responsibility to give back. Not just your job. You might be working in a bank or somewhere else. You have a responsibility to give back outside of that. Even for me as a psychologist running an agency, I could say, I'm doing so many things. I don't need to bring it home to me. I need to bring it home. Because I have a responsibility to give back. Look at what I did. There we go. It's also built on this idea of generosity. We have been blessed. We, you, I, have been blessed with so much. You might not think it. You might think, I'm barely making it here at the university or whatever. We have all been blessed with so much. and we have a responsibility to give it back. I'm going to skip Mother Teresa. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Mother Teresa. There's a mother back there. Anyone that have heard of Mother Teresa? She once said, and this is, I almost had it tattooed to my body. I've never had a tattoo though, so I was afraid to do that. But I really believe this is the case. The problem with our world is we draw the circle of our families too small, right? Who's your family? Everyone thinks of DNA, right? My mom, my brother, my sister, my children. That's my family. It hasn't all been that way. It hasn't been that way throughout history. That we need to broaden the circle of our families a little bit, and allow someone to enjoy the benefits that we all have. Let me skip through poverty. I'm going to skip all of this. Oh, man. I'm going to have to skip all of this. You have to come back. Well, let me just go through this really quickly. I'll have a few minutes. When we talk about unleashing volunteers, you have to think about, what are we training them to do? We don't want to train them to be social workers, mini social workers. No, that's not their job. But they need some filter to how to think about, how am I helping this family? And there's been research done internationally on these things called the protective factors. That if you can establish these protective factors in the lives of children or their parents, that you could change a trajectory of that family. You could change a trajectory. Resilience. What does being resilient mean? The human capacity to face and overcome or transform by adversity. We don't get rid of adversity for people. They're still going to struggle with homelessness or whatever, but we can help them do well among adversity. Just because you're going through it a hard time, that doesn't mean your children need to suffer. How do we buffer our children from those difficult situations? And there's building blocks around communication, coping skills, things like that are all about building parents to deal with the adversity that face them. The second one is this idea of social connections. I don't need to go into this anymore. That parents need people. If a mom has something good that happened to them with their children, they should have someone to call to celebrate. Right? They should have. If their 2-year-old started to walk, they should have someone to call to celebrate. It doesn't have to be just bad that they reach out for help. They need social connections. It's building these relationships, and it's determining what went wrong. Who's part of your networks? If you're in social work, you've done this, eco-mapping. Who's part of your network? Where did that go wrong? How can we establish? And where do friends and where do host families and others fill in for you? Parenting, knowledge of parenting and community and development. There is so much that is passed on from one host family to a parent around how to care for children. It's incredible. Our average stay of safe families in our homes are roughly 6 weeks. That's all. 6 weeks to prevent child abuse? Is that worth it? Yes. 6 weeks to prevent child abuse, prevent kids from being harmed. We can make a difference in that. And that through those relationships, kids learn. Parents learn how to manage their kids. And then this last one is concrete support at times of need. I was doing therapy for a mom. She got her kids back and she was putting her kids to bed and the kids didn't want to go to bed. Every night, bedtime was it was difficult. Kids would scream and cry. They didn't want to go to bed. I'd try and teach her all these behavioral strategies of how to deal with it. Nothing was hitting until I asked, where are the kids sleeping? And she said, oh, they have to sleep on the floor because I don't have a mattress. Can you believe how stupid I was? trying to use all these psychological interventions when all she actually needed was a mattress. So I said, wait a minute, let me get you a mattress, and then if that doesn't work, come on back. I had friends who had mattresses sitting around no one has slept on for years. And they were delighted to give that mattress to someone else. And I gave them the mattress, no problems with bedtime. There are certain situations that concrete things are needed. Not all the time. I don't want to say that all the time. They do need psychologists and social workers. I don't want to say that. But there are concrete things that we often ignore and don't deal with. And let me just end with this, because I only have a few minutes left. To be a social, I became an Ashoka Fellow. Ashoka Fellows are those who are willing to think outside the box, to not look at normal ways. If you look at child welfare has been the same. In the United States, child welfare is only 70 years old. Only 70 years old. Child welfare has been doing it the same way for over 70 years. And the outcomes are the same. Despite the billions and billions and billions of dollars, we haven't made a dent in the problem of vulnerable children. So they need people who are willing to think outside the box. In a room like this, there's a number of you who are interested in thinking outside the box. Not to look at, let's do business as normal. Let's do it in a different way. In a way no one has done before. In a way that everyone will say to you, it will not work. But what our kids need is for us to think differently. To think better about how we can make their lives better. The second thing is what I think about is I wanted to move from direct service. Let's just do a lot of safe families for my agency. I just want to do a lot of safe families. To move to lots of safe families. But I want to move to change the system. Let's make life better for children. That goes beyond just what I do as a host family. And then let's change the frame of what's going on in the lives of families and their children. To think beyond that. Because you hit a tipping point. The bottom line are really just a graph of the change that you can make by yourself. Right? The upper point is where you join with others to make a difference, like we're doing today. I just want to give Mother Choice credit of bringing people together and say, let's do this together. Let's no longer stay in our little rooms and do our own little thing. Let's figure out how we can make life better for all of Hong Kong. And then, in addition to innovation, is to think about, can we develop a movement? A movement is very, very different. I'm a movement leader. I was elected 12 years ago of one of 12 movement leaders in the United States. All the other ones are leading incredible things like Black Lives Matter or 1% or things like massive things. The question is, how do we unleash a massive amount of people to care about the very things we're interested in? How do we unleash your neighbors, your friends, to be interested about vulnerable children like you are? They don't have to be a social worker, but they can play a role. That's what Safe Families is about, a movement of people who are willing to make a difference in the lives with the little things that they have, that we literally can eradicate child abuse when we do so and do so as a movement. And it involves really the center, where you decentralize movements and you allow things to grow at a different level. So that's all I have time to share. I'd love to share so much more. Can I just show you this one little guy? He's my Safe Family child. His brother was killed, unfortunately, and he came to stay with us for 6 weeks. And now Kier is part of my family. He looks very different than I do, but he's back with his mom, but he's part of my family and making a difference in his life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dave. On so many levels, I think you struck a lot of different aspects of everything that I think we all think about when we are working with children, right from the personal to the professional. And I think there was a beautiful integration of so many of the values that unfortunately many of us feel concerned about displaying at work. And sort of the takeaways from me really came where you talked about human nature and the generation today, which is a selfish generation, as you said. But then also at the same time, you have this wonderful example of the reality that human nature is not selfish. At its core, it's actually very compassionate. And it's just that if there is a core group of people who are willing to apply that in every context, the personal and the professional, then maybe part of our personal ethics, and this is something I hope we'll talk about tomorrow afternoon when we're talking about our personal charter, we can incorporate compassion as an ethic that we apply in everything that we do. Generosity and empowerment of those that we work with, and to see that, as Dave said, that there's nothing wrong with being supplemented. I'm a supplemented parent today. Otherwise, I would have had a 3-year-old clinging to my legs and I wouldn't have been able to come in. So there's great value in turning the tables on how we view these matters and moving from the negative type of characterization of people who need help towards a more positive way of looking at things and helping them realize that it's okay. And I think it's just such a beautiful example that I'm sure will stay with many of us in the days to come. I also think that there must be a lot of people who have questions for you, Dave, but unfortunately, we didn't build in time into our timetable today to allow for that. But I think that as we go through our workshops and our panels, I think there may be opportunities for people to sort of come back to the session and ask, Dave mentioned this. Now, how would I pick up on this value or this practice and integrate it in my setting, whether it's as a social worker, as a child psychologist, etc. So I hope you won't mind if we draw on your expertise again as we move through the program. At this point, I want to remind all of you that there's a sign-up sheet outside for your breakout sessions during lunch. And if you haven't already signed up, please do sign up. We're going to have a 15-minute coffee break, and then we'll come back for the next session. Thank you so much. The toilets are to the left. You can go right through. Coffee is downstairs on the first floor.